Why would someone use the last seconds of their life and to accuse, not to ask for help, not to call a loved one, but to say his name? The scream cut through the air like a blade, sharp, desperate, irreversible. And in the next moment, the cruelest, silence took over the scene. The street camera captured only a blur, a figure, a body on the ground. But the audio carried something that no one was prepared to hear. That was his name, that was all. 3 syllables spat out between blood and fear. 3 syllables that changed everything. Have you ever experienced this? Heard a word you couldn't forget? A sentence that seemed to carry more pain than meaning? She screamed his name as if confessing, as someone who condemns. Like someone who doesn't want to die carrying the truth in their chest. The first report said it was a robbery, that he was with her, that he tried to help, but the detail that no one saw was in her eyes before the end. Eyes that saw more than the police could explain. What you're about to discover may surprise you. This story doesn't start with crime. It starts in the days before, in the hushed conversations, in the subtle gestures, in the threats disguised as affection. It starts when she realizes she was being watched. She knew something he would never let come to light, and he decided to speak. But there was no time. Or maybe it did. Maybe that scream was the final plan, the last chance to leave a trail. Because she didn't scream for help. She didn't ask for help. She just said his name. Stay with me until the end. Because the truth that emerged in that last second destroyed everything. It wasn't just any scream. It was the cry of someone who knew he was going to die, and he couldn't let the culprit escape. And when the police heard the full audio, all hell broke loose. But this is just the beginning. He said he loved her, that he would do anything for her. But behind the gentle gestures, there was a cold control. Surgical. She smiled in photos. She deleted messages. She swallowed words. But the truth is, the truth cannot be silenced forever. She waits, she watches, and screams. That night he screamed with a force that broke the silence. It wasn't just a sound, it was a cut. Those that reveal more than 1,000 interrogations, more than any report. There are stories that don't ask for permission. They just find you. They touch you where no one else touches you, like this one. Hard, real, uncomfortable, and maybe somehow you felt something similar. That stifled doubt, that certainty that something is wrong. But no one sees it. Maybe you were the one who wanted to scream, or the one who listened but didn't know what to do. If something here made sense to you, comment. Sometimes, a sentence from you can be what someone on the other side needed to not feel invisible, and that's what makes this channel something bigger. Stories that are not just told, they are felt, shared. If it has kept you hooked this far, it's because it has truly found you. So leave your like. It takes this message to those who need to hear it. And if this story took your breath away, imagine what is yet to be revealed. Subscribe, because what comes next is even darker. The official report was cold, clinical, designed to summarize a life in a few lines. Armed robbery. Victim fought back. Attempt to provide assistance was unsuccessful. Cause of death. Blunt force trauma to the skull. That was how the story began, told by someone who saw the crime as just another number to be filed away. He said that was it, that he tried to help, that she screamed out of desperation in the middle of the chaos. The police had their version, simple and direct. His face in the records, impassive. The scene's setting, analyzed in millimeter detail. Everything seemed to close, to fit perfectly, until something started to bother him. A detail that escaped logic. A piece that didn't fit into that puzzle of blood and silence. The scream, that name said in the last seconds, did not match the official script. Why would she scream his name if he was trying to save her? Why accuse someone who supposedly tried to help? It was the beginning of a false conclusion, of a story that seemed complete but hid hidden truths. The case seemed simple. But then, the recording came. That recording changed everything. It revealed nuances that the report could never capture. It wasn't just the sound. It was the tone, the pain, the intention. At that moment, the victim's silence gained voice. A voice that contradicted the official version, that challenged the constructed narrative. It wasn't a simple cry for help. It was an accusation. It was a warning. And with this recording, the investigation mindset needed to change. It was no longer just any crime. It was a journey to uncover a hidden truth, buried among the words whispered in despair. The impact of this revelation was not limited to the police report. It spread behind the scenes of the investigation, affecting those who followed the case, the family members, and those who believed in the official version. Because when the truth begins to be questioned, everything becomes uncertain. Every decision, every statement, every clue needs to be reevaluated. And trust in what was said begins to crumble, opening the way for doubts and suspicions. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. You have to understand how a single word, a last word, can carry so much weight. How a muffled scream can become the trigger to collapse a narrative constructed with such precision. It's not just about what was said at the time. It's about everything that was left behind in the shadows, in the ignored details, in the unrevealed emotions. What led her to choose that name? What was at stake in that final moment? And most of all, what did her silence try to hide before the scream broke through the darkness? This is not just a crime story. It's a story about decisions that change destinies, on the complexity of truth, about the dark side of human transformation when the pressure becomes unbearable. And the scariest thing, this hidden truth may be closer than we imagine. Comment. I'm on this journey too. The silence in the room was broken only by the muffled sound of rapid breathing, that almost imperceptible noise that carries the weight of anguish and despair. The recording found on her cell phone revealed more than just voices. It brought to light the last thread of life, the exact moment when everything fell apart. Those minutes before the crime were not just seconds frozen in time. They were a universe filled with tension, fear, and a truth that no one could imagine. The conversations that echoed there were not ordinary dialogues. They were urgent whispers, words chosen carefully so as not to be heard by others but impossible to hide from those invisible walls of the hidden camera on the device. She spoke of delivering something that seemed much bigger than a simple confession, something that carried the power to turn the entire story upside down. He stood there, trying to silence every word that escaped, trying to silence that voice that, deep down, he knew would bring his downfall. It was a silent struggle, a battle between what could be revealed and what needed to be hidden at all costs. The mood was thick, the atmosphere charged with fear, but also with bitter determination. And then came the scream. A piercing, violent scream that broke the heavy air and reverberated in the emptiness of the room like a definitive sentence. His name, spoken with such force and desperation, carried a weight impossible to ignore. It wasn't just a sound. It was a surrender. It was a veiled accusation, a last attempt at liberation. You will understand why that scream was a sentence. That solitary word was the trigger for the complete transformation of the case, the moment when the hidden truth began to emerge from the shadows. From that moment on, each piece of the story began to reveal itself in layers, as if it were a journey into the mind of someone who decided, at the last moment, to break the silence that imprisoned him. In the midst of the darkness, a new mentality began to emerge. The mentality of resistance, of fighting against what seemed inevitable. The decisions made at that moment echoed far beyond that room, influencing the entire trajectory of the case, the investigations, the suspicious looks, and even the reactions of those who, until then, believed in a single version of the facts. The impact of that scream was more than emotional. It was a key that opened a door to the backstage of that story, to the secrets that were being carefully kept. It was an invitation to delve into a territory where nothing was as simple as it seemed, where every word could be a clue and every Silence, a riddle to be deciphered. And what followed that last word was a succession of revelations that began to dismantle everything that seemed right, everything that seemed true. The recording brought to light more than evidence. It brought the palpable sense that in that moment something much bigger was at stake. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because to understand the complexity of this final confession, we need to look beyond the sound and the words. We need to explore the emotions behind that scream, the internal transformation that drove that surrender, and the weight that this hidden truth carried for everyone involved. That scream was a turning point, a fine line between before and after, a sentence that defined not only his fate, but also the impact of that night on her life, on the minds of those who were watching, and even on the very structure of justice, which often fails to capture the darker side of human decisions. Each decision made at that moment reverberated in a chain of events that transformed the perception of crime, revealing that behind a violent act, there is a complexity of relationships, secrets, and motivations that defy simplistic understanding. What you will discover from here on is not only about the crime itself, but about the invisible scars we carry when confronted with unexpected truths about the internal journey of those who face the weight of the consequences, and about how reality can be distorted by what we choose to hide. This story has more layers than it seems, more shadows than lights, more questions than answers. Comment there. That makes sense to me. She was not just a victim. She never had been. In that maze of lies, she carried the weight of a truth that few would dare face. What appeared to be fragility, fear, was in fact a silent flame, a contained fire that threatened to explode. Behind the scenes of that fateful night, she was not just a face marked by pain. She was a force carrying dark secrets, an invisible weapon against him. Flashback. What many people don't know, what almost never appears in the cold reports and rehearsed testimonies, is that she knew too much. Not only did she know, but she kept evidence that could topple empires, destroy reputations, and reveal the hidden truth that he desperately wanted to keep buried. Every document, every hidden message, every detail that seemed irrelevant was a loaded bullet, ready to fire at the heart of the lie. She was afraid. Of course she was. Who wouldn't be when faced with the shadow of a man capable of so much? But her fear was different. It was a fear permeated by courage, the courage that only those who are on the edge of the abyss know. Determined, firm, even with the wounds that life had opened in her chest, she faced the darkness head-on, ready to pay the price of being, the only one who could dismantle the house of cards he had built. This woman, so far from the simplistic role of a defenseless victim, carried a deep pain, an emotional wound that marked every word, every gesture. It was a wound that isolated her, that made her even more dangerous, because those who carry such pain know how to use it to protect themselves, to attack, to survive in a world where the truth is not a right, but a constant battle. She knew that the transformation she could bring about would not only be in her own life. It was a change that would affect the mindset of everyone involved, that would challenge the official versions, that would open their eyes to the complexity behind what seemed like a simple crime. Her decision was not just an individual act. It was the beginning of a journey that would reveal the backstage, the shadows, the layers that no one wanted to see. It wasn't easy being in her shoes, living with the weight of what she knew, carrying the responsibility of someone who holds the hidden truth, living with the impact that this would have. The loneliness, the fear, the anguish of knowing that any false step could mean the end, but she kept going, fueled by a strength that few understand, a strength that only comes from the deepest pain. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding who she really was is essential to unraveling what happened that night. It's not just about retelling facts, but about delving into the mindset of someone who, despite her fear, chose to be the protagonist of her own truth. This choice changes everything. The meaning of the scream, the weight of the surrender, the impact of the decisions made under extreme stress. Every secret she kept, every fear she faced, are pieces of a puzzle that defies first impressions, that deconstructs the official version of events. This is a story of transformation, Not only hers, but of everyone who has been touched by this truth for better or for worse. The behind the scenes of this journey is filled with revelations that go beyond what any superficial investigation could reach. Revelations that only those who dare to look into the human soul can perceive. How painful the truth can be, how much wounds can shape decisions, and most importantly, how silence can be a form of screaming. Comment. I'm on this journey too. She wasn't just dying that night, she was being silenced. The silence they tried to impose didn't come from the absence of noise, but from an invisible threat, made up of words hidden in dark corners, of messages that should never have been found. Letters buried in drawers, envelopes with almost indecipherable signs, encrypted messages that defied any attempt at immediate comprehension. The truth was there, hidden in codes that she, with a sharp mind and quiet courage, began to unravel. These letters were not just notes from a random story. They were fragments of a confession that revealed something much bigger, something beyond what the police wanted us to know, what the media dared reveal. She had uncovered a crime no one could have imagined. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding, but a secret so dark that its revelation threatened to destroy not just lives but entire systems. Imagine the weight of carrying such a secret. Not a trivial secret, but a truth that corrodes the soul and ignites fear. She knew that exposing it could cost her life, and yet she decided to move forward. Because sometimes the truth doesn't remain silent of its own accord. It needs to be imposed, extracted by force with blood and courage. These messages, with codes so complex that even experts were perplexed, contained details that directly linked her tormentor to a hidden past, to crimes that were buried under layers of false evidence and official discourse. What she held in her hands was not just a personal threat. It was a blow that could shake the structure of impunity, a piece that dismantled the puzzle of selective justice. But this discovery came at a high price. The threats intensified, the fear materialized in concrete actions. She felt the weight of the siege, the constant surveillance, the isolation that accompanies those who challenge power. The impact this had on her mindset was profound. From victim to warrior, from silence to voice that insists on screaming in the darkness. There is one aspect of the story that few people know about, a detail that reveals just how meticulous the plan to silence her was. The confession she found not only implicated others, people we would never have guessed, but also showed the reach of a web of lies that stretched beyond what seemed possible. This is where controversy becomes inevitable. Because it is not just about her, it is not just about him. It is about a chain of decisions, hidden interests, dirty pacts that operate in the shadows, manipulating facts, destroying lives, erasing evidence. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding the secret she discovered is understanding the complexity of the hidden truth, the intricate web of relationships that move the game behind the curtains. This is a journey that challenges common sense, that exposes the fragility of justice when confronted with power and fear. This truth was not only a turning point in her story, but a defining moment for all of us, who are silent witnesses to a system that often protects the guilty and sacrifices the innocent. What seemed like a simple hate crime was actually a key part of a larger machine, where every decision made has a devastating and irreversible impact. Her transformation from victim to bearer of forbidden truth reveals much about the mindset required to survive in an environment where every step can be fatal. Her journey is not just about physical survival, but about psychological resilience, about maintaining sanity as the world around her falls apart. These behind-the-scenes stories, these revelations, show us that nothing is simple, that behind every word, every gesture, there is a silent struggle for the truth, a constant clash between those who want to expose and those who want to hide. Comment there. That makes sense to me. This story is not for everyone. What you are seeing here is rare material that few have access to. It is a deep dive into secrets that have been carefully guarded until now. The complexity, the tension, the revelations that lie ahead cannot be found anywhere else. If you've made it this far, you know this isn't just another story. It's a mind-bending journey that challenges what you think you know about justice, truth, and power. And that's why it's worth sticking around until the end, because what comes next is surprising. It's no exaggeration. Every bit of this story was designed to provoke, to disturb, and above all, to show what really happens when the truth knocks on the door, and no one wants to open it. So, if you want to continue this journey with me, if you want to understand the behind the scenes, the decisions that changed everything, stay here. The best is yet to come. And the turning point that will make you look at everything with different eyes is coming now. Have you ever experienced something that no one would believe if you told them? Comment below. Sometimes someone here will understand. It wasn't love. It never was. It was something darker, an obsession that ate away at everything inside. Absolute control. The invisible hand that dictated her every move, her every word. From the beginning, he'd woven a web that trapped not only her body but her mind, her soul. This prison had no bars, but it was as real as cold steel. He disguised his violence with smiles, gestures that seemed affectionate but carried a brutal weight. A silent, masked violence, where every touch was a warning, every sweet word a threat. It was a dependence that went far beyond the physical, an emotional addiction that kept her hostage, even when fear was already eating away at her insides. To those who observed from the outside, it might have seemed like love. To those who lived it, it was the constant torture of abandonment disguised as presence. He needed her to be silent for her scream to be trapped in his chest, because in that relationship, silence was a prison, and freedom was a lie too dangerous to be achieved. It was a macabre dance where affection was confused with fear, where the line between love and possession disappeared in a haze of manipulation and pain. And the worst part, she knew it. She felt the trap, but she couldn't escape. Her trauma wasn't just a consequence of the past, it was an addiction, a perverse cycle that trapped her like an invisible specter. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because understanding his mind is opening the door to the hidden truth, to the backstage of manipulation and power. It is in this dark space that the decisions he made to maintain his dominance are revealed, the devastating impact of these choices on her life, and how this journey of control and fear shaped every moment until the outcome we know today. Every gesture, every word, every silence carried a calculated intention, a movement in the cruel strategy he was devising. It is impossible to dissociate this mentality from the shadow that fell over her. Her transformation in that scenario was a constant struggle against the erasure of her own identity, a painful effort to survive in an invisible prison. The signs were there, hidden between crooked lines in the small cracks of toxic coexistence. What seemed normal to some to her was an emotional minefield, where every wrong step could be fatal. His obsession was not a simple deviation. It was a state of mind, a disease that fed on vulnerability, that sought to nullify everything she was and replace it with a molded, silent, submissive version. This power game revealed the true face of psychological violence, invisible but deadly. It controlled not only her actions but her thoughts, fears, and hopes. His addiction to maintaining control over her created a perverse dynamic, where abandonment was the constant threat that forced her to adapt, to mold herself, to try to survive on the edge of sanity. And in this fine line between false love and cruel possession, what is really left for those who live through this torment? The pain of a deep wound that never heals, the anguish of someone who needs to find strength within their own despair. Her story is not just that of a victim, but of someone who fought not to disappear, even when everything seemed lost. Comment there. That makes sense to me. She could have chosen silence. She could have let the darkness swallow every breath, every shred of life that remained. She could have screamed, "Help!" a desperate plea thrown into the wind, echoing lost in cold, indifferent streets. She could have whispered, "Help!" a faint, almost inaudible call amidst the chaos that consumed her. But no, she chose something else. She chose to say his name, that name that carried weight, that opened old wounds, that brought to light a past marked by control, violence, lies. Saying his name was an act of resistance, a final gesture of courage, a veiled denunciation that even in the imminence of death burned like fire in her words. It was not a simple murmur. It was a proclamation, a silent scream that crossed time and space, loaded with the hidden truth that many had tried to erase. His name became a shadow that accompanied her until the very end, a ghost present on her journey to the end. She died, but she dragged his name with her. And that name could not be ignored, buried with her. It was an invitation for the pieces of that dark story to begin to fit together, for the hidden truth to begin to emerge from the depths where they tried to bury it. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding the weight of this name is to delve into the behind-the-scenes decisions that shaped this tragedy. Each syllable spoken by her carries an impact that reverberates beyond the present, a mentality that reveals much more than what is seen on the surface. The act of choosing to name, of denouncing with a single word, exposes the complex layers of manipulation, fear, and pain. It is a transformation that goes beyond simple action. It is a declaration that challenges imposed silence, that breaks with the logic of disguised violence, that resists erasure. This name carries with it an emotional charge that fuels reflection on how the truth can be camouflaged, how the shadows of the past become invisible traps for those who live at the mercy of a dominating mind. It also reveals the behind the scenes of a journey marked by internal conflicts, by the struggle between the desire for freedom and the weight of invisible bonds. The final denunciation, made at that crucial moment, is a reflection of her internal struggle, a cry that did not need to be loud to be heard because its intensity came from a courage that few understand. It is a key to opening doors that until then had been locked, to revealing buried secrets, to confronting the controversy that insists on remaining in the shadows. And it is at this moment that the impact of this decision becomes even clearer. She did not just speak his name. She challenged the entire structure built to silence her. She transformed her last breath into a powerful weapon, an invisible legacy that defies time and memory. Comment: I'm on this journey too. The silence that followed the crime was heavy, almost palpable. He knew he had to act fast to set the perfect stage. The mask was already in place, a fake, rehearsed cry that sounded more like a play than any genuine expression of grief. It wasn't about him. It never had been. It was about keeping up appearances, controlling the narrative, manipulating the pieces so that everything fell exactly where he wanted it to. The call to the police was cold, meticulous, calculated. Words chosen with surgical precision to arouse sympathy, to divert any suspicion. The tone, however emotional it tried to appear, carried a tension too subtle to be ignored. Whoever heard it, even without knowing it, sensed something wrong, something caught between the lines, an invisible fissure in the construction of that moment. As the testimonies began, inconsistencies began to emerge. Times that didn't match, confusing accounts that contradicted each other in seconds. Tiny details that broke the linearity of the story, defying the logic of what had been told so far. It was a puzzle put together in a hurry, with pieces swapped around, a desperate attempt to erase what had really happened. But what few people knew, what only those who listened carefully were able to capture, was hidden in that audio, in that muffled moment that almost went unnoticed. A whisper, almost inaudible, cut off by the interference, swallowed up by the silence that permeated the scene. A simple phrase, loaded with threat and brutal truth. You should never have said it. That sentence alone opened a crack in the wall of lies that had been built with so much effort. It was a warning, a sign that there was more behind the crime than the official version could admit. A moment of controlled revelation, a turnaround that only those who look behind the scenes can see. The impact of this whisper is profound, because it reveals a mentality that does not accept being challenged, that reacts violently when exposed. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding this reaction is to delve into the depths of a mind that lives on a tightrope between absolute control and the constant fear of losing what it believes to be its own. Every decision, every word, Every calculated silence is part of a journey where the hidden truth struggles to escape the shadows of manipulation. This muffled whisper, in addition to being a threat, carries with it an emotional weight that intertwines with trauma, the feeling of loss and the desperate need to maintain an intact image even if it is only a facade. It forces us to reflect on the impact that the decisions made at that moment had, not only on those who were at the center of the tragedy, but on everyone involved in that web of lies and secrets. The twist hidden in that audio is an invitation to look more closely at the details that often go unnoticed, to question the official versions, to understand the behind-the-scenes that shape such a complex story. It is a reminder that in many situations the truth lies not in the words spoken, but in what is silenced, in what is whispered in the shadows. This controlled dose revelation not only fuels curiosity, but also broadens our understanding of the dynamics surrounding this crime. It leads us to question the mentality behind the actions, the transformation that occurs when fear and the need for power mix, creating an environment where violence disguises itself as normality. Comment there. That makes sense to me. The case seemed to have everything to be solved, but it became a labyrinth of shadows and doubts. Without physical evidence, the system trembled. The silence of the evidence weighed more heavily than any word spoken in court. There were no witnesses to confirm what the whisper in the audio already denounced. The lack of concrete evidence gave way for the mystery to grow, for the truth to be swallowed by the fog of uncertainty. The trial that everyone was waiting for never happened. The case simply died, buried in archives and papers that no one opened again. However, while the official justice system seemed to be asleep, the voice of that recording began to circulate among those seeking to understand beyond what was said. The hidden truth took on a life of its own, driven by a thirst for justice that the bureaucracy denied. Little by little, people who had never had any contact with the case began to gather, in a silent, almost underground movement, to question what was taken for granted. The lack of a trial, the lack of official answers, became fuel for indignation and the search for meaning. The feeling of injustice grew like a burning flame, burning the patience of those who felt that something was wrong, that the full story had never been revealed. This invisibility of the evidence turned the case into a symbol of how often the truth is trapped between the fingers of bureaucracy and manipulation. But also, curiously, a point of union for an invisible community, which recognized itself in the discomfort of this unresolved truth. A sense of belonging forged in doubt, in parallel investigation, in whispered conversations on online forums, in closed groups where the audio was analyzed frame by frame, searching for hidden clues, fragments of a deeper reality. The lack of an official conclusion did not silence the narrative. On the contrary, it opened space for conflicting versions, theories that crossed the line between reason and fear. Each new detail unearthed is a piece in the transformation of the collective mentality about the case, challenging what seemed definitive. It is in this nebulous territory that the journey of understanding intensifies, revealing how the impact of a crime can go beyond the initial scene and invade the minds of those who follow it from close or far away. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the absence of judgment does not mean the absence of consequences. In fact, it redefines what we understand as justice and exposes how fragile the system is in the face of human complexity. The hidden truth circulated in the audio becomes a distorted mirror, showing not only what was done but also what was ignored, omitted, left aside. Each listen reveals a little more about the mentality of those trying to hide, and about the pain of those left behind, stuck waiting for answers that never come. This case then becomes a journey behind the scenes of injustice, a place where decisions are made not only based on evidence but also on hidden agendas and strategies that manipulate public perception. The transformation that takes place here is silent, invisible to many but devastating for those who experience the direct impact of this official abandonment. It is the encounter between the coldness of the legal process and the brutal heat of human experience, a tension that provokes reflection on what justice really means in a world where words can be erased, but the echoes persist. The audio, that should never have been released from anonymity, becomes living proof that the truth does not dissolve into oblivion, even when the system insists on burying the story. And in this forced silence, an invisible network of questions grows, where the collective mentality is shaped by resistance, by the tireless search for what was denied. Comment: I'm on this journey too. His name did not die with the silence of justice. On the contrary, it continues to echo, carrying a weight that does not dissolve with the passing of the years. To this day, anyone who dares to listen to that audio feels a chill that rises up the spine, that settles in the chest, as if the voice held something far beyond words, something that crosses time, that calls, and at the same time, haunts. That's why she screamed my name. A simple phrase, almost banal at first hearing, but when its meaning is revealed, it becomes a sentence filled with pain, resentment, a truth that cuts deep. It was not a desperate plea, a plea for help. It was a condemnation, a curse cast in the final moment, a cry that does not ask for help. It demands justice or revenge, or perhaps just the recognition of a destiny that cannot be erased. The mentality behind this scream is a window into the backstage of what happened that night, a disturbing insight into the relationship between victim and perpetrator, a bond that goes beyond the crime and into the realm of the rawest and most confusing emotions. This psychological impact, this transformation that violence generates, is not limited to the crime scene, but reverberates in every life touched by it. Those who listen feel the tension, the internal conflict, the struggle between what was done and what should have been avoided. This hidden truth within the audio, this layer of meaning that few dare to decipher, is what keeps the story alive, pulsating, disturbing those who try to bury the facts. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding this final reaction is not just understanding a moment, but accessing an entire journey of decisions, regrets, and above all, secrets kept in the shadows. What did he do after the crime? This is the question that no one seems to want to answer, but which carries the potential to transform everything that has been said. That name that echoes is not just a brand. It is the beginning of a dark cycle, a sequence of choices that reveal the darkest side of the human being. It is the revelation of the backstage, where justice fails, where the impact of the violent act multiplies, creating a web of consequences that go beyond the visible. Every step he took after that scream is a fundamental piece in understanding the true dimension of the crime. It is not just an isolated act, but an unfolding that exposes the complexity of the mind, the fragility of morals, and the brutality of social abandonment. This transformation, this change in his trajectory, redefines the way we look at what happened, no longer as a simple case but as a story full of layers, mysteries, and a tension that does not dissipate. Revelations that emerge little by little, like fragments that assemble a disturbing puzzle, full of twists and turns that defy understanding. In the silence of the post-crime, the sound of that name continues to vibrate in people's minds, opening space for questions that go far beyond the obvious. It is an invitation to delve into a deeper truth, where each decision he makes may be a reflection of unhealed wounds, hidden traumas, a mentality that has been lost between pain and violence. The impact of all this goes beyond what justice can reach, penetrating the depths of human transformation, revealing a side that many prefer to ignore. Little by little, this story becomes a journey that challenges any simple notion of right and wrong, a play of light and shadow where the answers are partial, and the mystery grows in silence. It is in this terrain that the narrative intensifies, that the tension increases, and that the weight of the words becomes even denser. A cycle of pain, injustice, and secrets that insist on not being buried. Comment there. That makes sense to me. If you've come this far, it's because this silence also screamed inside you. And when a story goes through us like this, full of buried truths, layers that hurt and signs that we feel without understanding, it's impossible to leave the story the same. If something here caught your attention, if some part touched something that no one else sees, then you are already part of this. Sign up now, because here, each video is another step in this dive. And those who dive in, transform. Leave a comment. "I'm with you until the end" is not just a phrase. It is the sign of someone who felt the weight and chose to continue. And if this story silenced you, imagine who still needs to hear it. Like the video. It is your silent gesture that makes this truth go further. And perhaps save someone who doesn't even know they need to be saved. Because in the end, and that's how pain finds an echo. And what comes after that is even darker. There's a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there. Because what comes after this is even more disturbing.